just after dawn, October 25, 1944. A rain squall drifts across a gray sea east of Samar, and out of it comes a ship that does not belong in this fight. She is USS Johnston, a Fletcher-class destroyer. 2,100 tons, next to no armor, 5 guns of 5 inches, and a crew the Navy files under a single cold word: expendable. Her captain is Commander Ernest Evans, bareheaded on an open bridge. Dead ahead of him stands the most powerful surface fleet Japan has left: 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, 11 destroyers. Beneath Johnston's keel, the sea floor falls away for miles. Evans does not turn away from that fleet. He turns toward it. 327 men ride her in. Watch what one destroyer does with the next 2 hours. To understand why a single destroyer would charge a battle line, you have to understand the trap that put her there. It is the fall of 1944. American troops are waiting ashore at Leyte in the Philippines, and the fleet is there to protect them. Off the island of Samar sits a small task unit called Taffy 3. 6 escort carriers, slow, thin-skinned merchant hulls with flight decks bolted on, screened by 3 destroyers and 4 smaller destroyer escorts. Their job is to fly cover for the men on the beach. They were never meant to fight warships. The Japanese had built a plan to exploit exactly that. Lure the American battle fleet north with a decoy, then send a striking force through San Bernardino Strait in the dark, straight at the landings. It worked. Admiral Halsey took the fast carriers north after the decoy, and the door to the strait swung open. Through it came Vice Admiral Kurita's center force. The fleet that came through was, ship for ship, among the most dangerous afloat. Its crews had trained for night battle harder than any navy on Earth. Its torpedoes were the finest on any ocean. And its sailors had been told this sortie was likely a death ride, a chance, in the words of their own planners, to find a fitting place to die. At the center of it steamed the battleship Yamato, the largest warship ever built, her 18-inch guns throwing shells of more than 3,000 pounds. Against that, Taffy 3 had 5-inch guns and torpedoes. The Japanese plan had worked to perfection. It had one flaw its authors never wrote down. It assumed the small ships in the way would get out of the way. The man on Johnston's bridge had been waiting years for this fight. Ernest Evans was born in Pawnee, Oklahoma, in 1908, half Cherokee, part Creek, and poor. He grew up in Muskogee, worked his way through a nearly all-white high school, and won an appointment to the Naval Academy without a single political favor to his name. He graduated in 1931. His classmates called him the Chief. In a Navy that did not expect much of an Oklahoma boy with his blood, he had climbed to the command of a warship on nothing but his own competence. He carried one wound the medals never mention. In 1942, in the Java Sea, he had been part of an American squadron forced to run from the Japanese, ship after ship lost, nothing to show for it. He hated it, and he swore he would not do it again. When Johnston was commissioned in October 1943, Evans stood before his new crew and told them what kind of ship this would be. "This is going to be a fighting ship," he said. "I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." Nobody got off. They were mostly kids, reservists, farm boys, mechanics, first-time sailors from towns nobody in Washington could find on a map. They had a captain who, whatever came over that horizon, had already settled one thing in his own mind. He did not know how to run. If this ship and her crew mean anything to you by the end, a like on this video keeps their names in front of a few more people. It costs you nothing. It would have meant more than it should to men who were never coming home. 0700. The squall opens, and the lookouts on Taffy 3 see pagoda masts on the horizon that are not supposed to be there. Salvos the size of freight cars begin falling among the carriers, throwing up colored geysers, red and green and yellow, each color a different Japanese ship ranging in. Sprague turns his carriers away and runs. And without waiting for an order, Evans turns Johnston the other way. She is the first ship to lay smoke, the first to open fire, the first to run at the enemy. "Prepare to attack the major portion of the Japanese fleet," Evans tells his crew. "All engines ahead, flank. One destroyer, alone, sprinting at 4 battleships." On the bridge of a Japanese cruiser, a gunnery officer watches a single American destroyer peel out of the smoke and come straight at his division. Nothing in his training accounts for it. Warships that small do not charge battle lines. They screen, they flee, they die quietly. This one is closing the range on purpose. At 07:15, with the range down to about 10 miles, Johnston's guns open on the lead cruiser, Kumano. Her gunnery officer works the mounts at 15 and 18 rounds a minute, and the shells walk across the cruiser better than 40 hits in 5 minutes. Consider the arithmetic of that duel. The Japanese line could throw 80,000 pounds of steel in a single salvo. Johnston could answer with 275. She kept closing anyway. At 07:27, her torpedoes reach the cruiser. One strikes Kumano on the starboard side and tears the bow clean off her, and the big ship drops out of the fight. 3 minutes later, the sea catches up with Johnston. 3 14-inch shells from a battleship, then 3 6-inch, walk through her at once. Her gunnery officer would say it felt like a puppy smacked by a truck. The blasts kill the power to her aft guns, wreck her steering, and cut her speed in half. On the bridge stands Evans, and he is a ruin. His helmet is gone, his shirt blown off his back, the hair on his chest singed black, 2 fingers of his left hand shot away. A corpsman moves to help him. "Don't bother me now," he says. "Help some of those guys who are hurt." He wraps a handkerchief around the stumps and keeps conning his ship. For one moment the guns fall silent, the smoke drifts, and a wrecked destroyer sits alone in the middle of the Pacific with almost nothing left to throw. Her torpedoes are gone. One engine is dead. Any reasonable officer would haul off now, save what was left of the ship and the men, and call it a day well fought. Evans turns her back into the fire. He sees the escort carrier Gambier Bay taking hits from a heavy cruiser, and he makes a choice with one purpose. "Commence firing on that cruiser," he orders. "Draw her fire onto us and away from Gambier Bay." He is asking the enemy to shoot at him instead, and the enemy obliges. For the next hour, Johnston fights everything Kurita sends near her. She trades shots with a battleship. She takes on a column of destroyers alone and drives them off their torpedo runs. And she bleeds. Her guns go one by one. Fires spread. By 9:30, she is dead in the water, and the Japanese destroyers close in a ring and pour rounds into her. A Japanese destroyer captain, circling the burning wreck, watches something he cannot explain. The ship should be finished. She is still shooting. A single mount, cranked by hand, keeps firing at ships 50 times her size until it too falls silent. She had no armor, no power, and no torpedoes. And still she would not stop. He did not know how to run, and neither in the end did his ship. At 09:45, Evans gave the order to abandon ship. About 25 minutes later, Johnston rolled over and went down. As she sank, one of the Japanese destroyers reportedly slowed, and her captain saluted her. Evans was last seen alive in the water. He was never found. If your father, your grandfather, or someone in your family served in the Pacific, in the Atlantic, in the tin cans or the baby flat tops, put his name, his ship, and his hometown in the comments. That is how the memory survives. Now the question worth asking. Why could one American destroyer do that? And why could the fleet behind her absorb the loss and keep fighting? Start with the ship herself. Johnston was not rare. She was one of more than 170 Fletcher-class destroyers America built during the war, turned out of the yards faster than the enemy could sink them. The word expendable was not an insult. It was a strategy. A nation that can replace a destroyer in a matter of months can afford to spend one to save 6 carriers. Behind that stood a system the Japanese never matched. Damage control schools that taught crews to fight fire and flooding as hard as they fought the enemy. A 21-inch torpedo that by this stage of the war actually worked. Radar and the training to use it. And then the number that measures what it cost. Of the 327 men aboard Johnston that morning, 141 lived. 186 did not. Some died in the shell fire. Many more survived the sinking and then died in the water, waiting 2 days for a rescue that came late. The fleet that faced them could answer none of that. No pipeline to replace the pilots and ships it was losing. No damage control doctrine worth the name. Radar arriving too late to matter. And beneath all of it, a fuel shortage so deep the sortie was close to a one-way trip. In the 2 hours off Samar, that difference stopped being a chart and became a battle. Here is what the Japanese could not account for. They never understood what they were fighting. Kurita and his staff, peering through smoke and rain at destroyers charging like cruisers, convinced themselves they had run into fleet carriers and heavy escorts, the American main body. After the war, his chief of staff told American interrogators they believed they faced a far larger force than the handful of thin-skinned ships actually there. The aggression is what fooled them. When a destroyer runs straight at a battleship and puts torpedoes in the water, that battleship has to turn to avoid them. Yamato herself was forced to comb a spread of torpedo wakes and steam north, and for long minutes that carried Kurita clear out of the battle, he was winning. They were right that they outgunned Taffy 3 100-1. They were right that they could sink the small ships one by one. What they got wrong was simpler and more human. They assumed courage would break before steel did. At about noon, Kurita ordered his fleet to come about. He broke off and steamed away from the transports he had come to destroy. Historians still argue over why. The men of Taffy 3 never needed the argument. Johnston's gunnery officer, Lieutenant Commander Robert Hagan, had fought her guns until there were no guns left to fire. He came home. Most of his shipmates did not. Admiral Nimitz called Taffy 3's survival nothing short of a special dispensation from the Lord Almighty. The Navy's own historian wrote that in no engagement in its history had the service shown more gallantry, guts, and gumption than in those 2 morning hours off Samar. So return to the question we opened on. What can one destroyer do against a fleet? This much. Johnston and the few ships like her broke up the most powerful surface force Japan had left and turned it back before it reached the beachhead it had come to butcher. She did not sink a battleship. One destroyer never could. What she bought was time, and time saved the men on the beach. Then the ledger. Fewer than half her crew came home, and Commander Evans was not among them. His body went to a sea that never gave it back. The fleet he charged had sailed, by its own planning, looking for a place to die. There is nothing in that to gloat over. There is only the accounting. This is what American naval power looked like that morning. Not the battleship. The unarmored tin can that would not turn around, under a captain who did not know how to run. Ernest Evans became the first Native American in the United States Navy to receive the Medal of Honor, and one of only 2 destroyer captains in the entire war to earn it. Remember the water under her keel, falling away for miles. In 2021, searchers found Johnston at the bottom of it, 21,000 feet down, 4 miles beneath the surface. When they filmed her, the number on her hull still read plain in the dark, the deepest shipwreck ever discovered. A year later, they found the Samuel B. Roberts, another of Taffy 3's small ships from that same morning, deeper still. The 2 deepest wrecks on Earth belong to the same 2 hours off Samar. Evans is down there yet, with his ship in harm's way, where he told them he would be. Subscribe if you want the next of these, the next ship, the next crew that was never meant to be forgotten. There are more names on that ocean floor than anyone ever counted.